Okay, we are here to talk about Three Body Problem, the complete first season that aired on Netflix. It dropped all at once on March 21st, 2024. This is from a series of novels adapted, written, created by David Benioff, D.B. Weiss, and Alexander Wu. In the 1960s, during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, Ye Wangji, a Chinese astrophysicist, is jailed for her scientific beliefs, but eventually transferred to a secret military base that's trying to make contact with extraterrestrials. After a series of horrible incidents, she decides to communicate with those aliens and give them the information they need to migrate to or take over Earth. In the present day, the aliens' technology is beginning to interfere with our world. They eventually make themselves known to the people of Earth and that they will be arriving in 400 years. Present day scientists and government officials begin trying to make plans for what seems like hopeless and inevitable future, but the one that is many centuries away. So that is a very conservative, short summary of a lot of
Very,
complex things that happen.
very brief recap. You didn't even mention the video game.
Yeah, this is the Three Body Problem. The idea of that title is from a game called the Three Body Problem, which some of our present day scientists find themselves in and having to solve different problems. Helps them uncover what the intentions of the aliens are. Maybe just started with this that this is the first season of what sounds like will be three. It's also adapted primarily from the first novel of three in the series. It touches a little bit on the beginning of the second novel. This is a show that has a lot of, shall we say, sort of scientific discussion, ideas, theories, gets deep into the weeds there, but not nearly as deep as it does in the books. Kind of had to make it very audience friendly. How did you find all of that? Did it get weighted down on you at all? Did you find that sort of took away from the story? What did you think about this with how much depth there was to that?
I mean, I don't know in terms of, I haven't read the book, which you have, I believe, right?
Yes.
Um, I wonder, various aspects of the show did make me think about whether I would enjoy the book more, actually, being the kind of person that I am, fan of science fiction and inquisitive mind and all
Yeah.
of that. Like in terms of the science that's in the show, I actually don't really feel like there is science in the show.
Yeah, there's a lot of science happening on the periphery. A lot of science is a part of the plot, but
There's mentions of
yeah,
science in the
yeah,
show.
yeah. We're at a particle accelerator, but we're not explaining, like maybe the book would, what a particle accelerator does.
Right. We're going to mention that you can't solve the three body problem, but we're not
Right.
even going to tell you what the three body problem is. Go to Wikipedia, you know.
Yes. Say if you want more of that, the text in the book is heavy on scientific exposition, analogies that might relate sort of what the science is to a more general audience. That's one of the things that Liu Cixin, the writer of these books, was praised for and won
Yeah.
some of these major awards for. It's deep in sort of that scientific mythology and sort of factual structure. So this show, I hate to use the phrase dumbed it down, but removed a lot of that so they could tell more of a story.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, you can see why
Yeah.
you wouldn't go on extended tangents about the scientific theories or what have you. So I'm not trying to give it too much grief about that. I do have some complaints about three
Hmm.
body problem, I suppose, and maybe a lot of them relate to this. Like the whole ladder plan with the nuclear bombs. I don't know. I was looking on the internet and I did find some things that said maybe it's not completely implausible. I'm like, all
I think
right,
that I enjoyed it more because it failed, right? If this had succeeded, and we got the knowledge 200 years down the road that we've hoped to get, I mean, it's like this is one of the most improbable things that's ever been created. So yeah, it's destined to fail.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, the biggest thing that bothered me if we're starting on this kind of topic area, I was very intrigued at the beginning by the idea that science is broken,
Hmm.
by the setup that scientists are um, killing themselves,
Yeah.
right? Which, as we move forward, might not be true. Maybe they weren't really, maybe they were being murdered.
Yes.
Um, And I mean, but was that always the case? Maybe that's not entirely clear. That muddies the waters a little bit. But the point I was really trying to hit here is they kind of say science is broken, but it's not, right? I mean, like, or okay, they messed up the particle accelerators.
Hmm.
Who cares? Like, or why do I care? I mean, I'm sorry. No
Yeah.
offense to people at CERN or whatever in the real world sitting here in 2024. I'm aware of these particle accelerators existing, and as a relative layman, don't really care all that much or feel like they are of great significance,
Yeah.
other than to the most abstruse levels of theoretical physics. There's some implication in the show, I guess, that they'll be of some importance down the line in terms of technological development, and maybe that's plausible.
Yeah.
But at first I felt like, oh, this is really intriguing if like the laws of physics are broken, but they're ultimately not, from what I
They're
could tell through eight episodes. It's just like
they're not broken. So I think there's maybe three things to point out here. Number one, that it is explained when we have this eye in the sky moment at the end of episode 5, when the aliens reveal themselves to Earth, that at least their messenger, Tatiana, reveals that they are afraid that over the 400 years it will take them to get here, that Earth will advance technologically beyond what the aliens have. So their weapon against them is going to be to stop the progress of technology. So in doing that, they're going to do it basically in two ways: to take some of these things that are, I guess what they're trying to say are the most cutting edge or leading edge of technology advancement, and have it say, okay, we're stopping that by skewing the results, by having you say that what you don't understand what's happening anymore, you don't know what you're doing, but also through the intimidation factor, right? So we can't forget what was happening back in episodes 1 and 2, where Augie was seeing that countdown in her field of vision, and there's sort of this threat of, if you don't stop what you're doing, then something horrible is going to happen to you. So it's sort of this combination of, we're going to make it seem like science doesn't work anymore, but also that your life may end if you continue working on this problem. So those were, those people were selected for a reason, and so that sort of became the mission of what they're trying to do, is stop that progress altogether.
yeah, which I get that, I think, and okay, fair enough. That's what the story is.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm really an outlier here where part of me is more disappointed that it wasn't deeper in a way, Some stuff
Yeah.
early on got me thinking about, and let me get in the weeds for a minute in philosophical terms. You have this question that people like Rene Descartes grappled with in the early modern period, 500 years ago, 400 years ago, of like, how do you know that the truth is the truth when you're not thinking about it, right? There, Descartes says, hey, look, if I'm doing a geometric proof,
Yeah.
I know it's absolutely certain that it's true when I'm thinking about the geometric proof. But then I want to say it's still true when I'm not thinking about this geometric proof. Is this sufficiently
Mhm.
clear? So Descartes was like, how do I know that the interior angles of a triangle are always 180 degrees when I'm not thinking about triangles? And of course, Descartes says God. It's a nice, satisfying answer, right?
Yeah.
Then, maybe 150 years later, maybe a little bit less, David Hume comes along. He's sort of asking the same question from a different philosophical point of view. And he sort of says, well, you don't. You don't know that the laws of nature always remain the same. We just have to presume this, right? And maybe you can say, oh, it's a well-grounded presumption because human nature is a part of nature or something like
Yeah.
that. That's all
Yeah.
you have to do. Anyway, whole history of like worrying about that kind of problem. So there is the at least conceptual possibility of what if the laws of physics changed, right? But okay, we're not really playing with that. I don't think when it
Yeah.
comes down to it.
And I will say, to your point, we may have even talked about this analogy before, or maybe you and I talked about this offline somewhere. There are some very interesting analogies in the book that talk about this, right? That as humans, we have this perception of the most, I think, interesting analogy they use is of a pool table, right? And they talk about, okay, if I move this pool table to the other side of the room, or I move it upstairs, or I move it across the street, or I move it to the other side of the world, no matter how I hit the cue, if I hit at the same spot, same degree, same force, same velocity, it's always going to do the same thing, right? Now, that makes sense to us because we understand the rules of what exists on this earth. What they're trying to say is that we have never encountered something that can come in and change those rules for us. And that's what this approaching or incoming civilization can do, right? And so it has this sort of exposition that really makes a lot of things make sense in the book that we don't see a lot of in the show.
But I don't know if they can. I mean, even you go back to the title, the three body problem. So if people are unaware, and I don't know, you could possibly have watched the show on Netflix and still be unaware. Really,
Mhm.
I mean, it's briefly mentioned. But the three body problem in physics, infamously, is that you cannot predict the interaction of three bodies, right? So if you've got three planets or three suns, like they do in the solar system we're exposed to, um, you can do it with two,
Yeah.
right? But not with three that are interacting in terms of their gravitational poles and all of that. People look at this. But I mean, from the point of view of thinking about physics as a human science, one might be tempted to say, well, this is a limitation of our science that
Right.
we have not been able to figure out, going back to Isaac Newton, or further. But like Isaac Newton's posing the problem, but we've still
Mhm.
not been able to solve the three body problem,
Yeah.
right? To the point where our friend Jin here in the show says it's unsolvable. Well, the
Yeah.
aliens agree, right? So it'd almost be more striking if like this advanced alien species could solve it, like that they
Yeah.
had more advanced physics, but apparently apparently they don't. So that's implying that this unsolvable problem is somehow like kind of intrinsically unsolvable or something like that, which it remains in line with what we know about physics,
Yeah.
broadly speaking.
Yeah. And I mean, I frankly love that we're having this discussion because what we're doing now is what's reflected in, you know, 580 pages in the book that they just can't get into in the show. I've written in the pieces I wrote for this about this show is that, these five main characters, this Oxford Five that exists in our present day, are not in the book at all. These
Okay.
characters, which Benioff and Weiss and Wu had to create, sort of represent different, reflections or emotions or different ways of approaching the problem that one character in the book is focused on. So you sort of have to have this tension. You see how these characters do different things, and so they had to make it such that this is a problem. We talked about this in before and wrote about this in the pieces. There have been other attempts, at least in this country, of adapting this, and they said, "Oh, we just can't do it. It's too complicated." And
Yeah,
so Benioff and Weiss had to sort of figure out the ways to make that happen that was more digestible, I guess, by this, at least by our Western audience.
that's fair enough. Let's get more, I don't know
Yeah, plot.
what, ethical, or
Yeah,
let's shift gears a little bit. Sort of striking scene with Little Red Riding Hood,
yeah,
with Santi apparently, no, no, we don't trust you because you lie. Now we're afraid of you. Um, I had a couple of different directions to go with that. You want to start in terms of how
yeah.
this
Just
lands for
it goes
you?
back to sort of what you're thinking about the idea of truth. So in this scene that we're talking about, Jonathan Price, who plays Mike Evans, is communicating with the Santi, and he tells them the story of Little Red Riding Hood. He's been telling them stories or having conversation with them, try to give them a sense of what our civilization is, but they cannot understand the concept of the wolf deceiving someone that can understand this concept of fiction, they can understand the concept of what they perceive to be as lying or mistruth, because I guess their civilization just does not have that as a part of who they are. And because they see these stories as a reflection of who we are, Mike Evans, who thought, oh, well, our little boat, our ship of people that are the followers of you will be safe, now seems to be sort of persona non grata for this civilization says, we can't do anything with you. I think the implication being we're going to come and wipe everyone out, even those of you that have said that you follow us or want to, be a part of who we are.
Right. Which so previously it seems first that the other kind of plan about forestalling human technological development that's ultimately revealed, and this would include with the sophons and all of that, that other kind of plan was already in place though prior to this, right? And so then it's only like that maybe they were thinking that this particular group led by Mike Evans and UNG, that group, the kind of cult of the Santee, which is overblown in my mind in terms of the religious
Yeah.
angle. Like it'd be easier for me to sympathize with them if they weren't getting all religious about it.
Yes.
Um, but that they would be safe, but that they would be the only ones that would be safe. But then in this scene, no longer them either. Or I don't know. I started
Yeah,
thinking
that's
about how to
right.
read all that together.
I get the impression that this cult or this group developed as, we want to be the ones that roll out the red carpet for the Santi when they arrive, right? So
Yeah,
the ones that buy into what they're doing. We recognize them as, I think they call them Lord. We recognize them as sort of the people that we want to devote ourselves to. And so we feel in doing that we will be safe when they come. That's the implication I get, or that's the what I think the impression is that I get from that group. Whereas once the true nature of us in our entirety is learned, they said, "Well, forget it. There's no one that's safe from this."
yeah, I think something like that. Something like that. Just thinking about the because the way it plays out, it almost doesn't feel like that in the show,
Yeah.
right? Because we find out about the plan with the sophons and everything afterwards.
Mhm.
But I think it's clear that they were already doing that before this scene. Um, Another question I have here, though, trying to pull a couple things together. You mentioned the kind of digital countdown
Mm.
appearing, and first of all, if that were to happen to me, I don't know how she like goes about her life for a couple days. Like I wouldn't just be worried about hitting zero. I'm like, this has to go away. I can't do
Yeah.
anything until this goes away. You know. Anyhow, how do we read this? Because of course there's the fear that when the countdown hits zero, something is going to happen. But from what we know about the technology they deployed, as primarily, surveillance and creating an illusion or what have you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was something really going to happen? And then let me get this all out there, and we'll talk about it all at once. Um, isn't this kind of lying? Isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm trying to recall from the text if there was an instance where the countdown ever got to zero. And if when the countdown got to zero, I think what we're meant to believe is that Tatiana or some version of Tatiana who can't be seen on camera, can't be witnessed, can only be seen by those that they want to be, want to see her, shows up and takes the life of whoever stopped the countdown. I think that before the aliens revealed themselves, there was the sense of we don't want to do that. And it in a way that to not do that, we just have to have the people that are working on this progressive science to stop doing it, right? To say, okay, we're going to have the humans stop themselves instead of us stop them, right? The murder is much more mysterious than someone saying this nanotechnology doesn't work. We're going to stop doing it.
Yeah. I just don't know if it's fully coherent. So
Yeah.
why did they kill Samwell? What's his name in this? Jack?
Yes. His name in the show,
It's
he's one of the
Jack, I think.
but Jack
Yeah.
Rooney. Yeah, John
Yeah.
Bradley plays Jack Rooney.
Why'd
So
they kill him? He just
because
makes
he
potato
has
chips.
because he has the real information now, he knows what's happening, but has said, I don't buy into it, I guess. And so, he's out of there. He's been a problem. He's been a part of, let's see, he and now I'm trying to remember the name of the character. He and Jen have gotten to a point where they have solved much of the three body problem within the game.
Hmm.
He has information not many people have. Most people, I guess, become converts at that point. He says no thanks. So because he has that information, he then has to die, according to this group. That's my opinion on that.
I guess, and then maybe I can blame the human being cult group as opposed to blaming the Santi aliens themselves. I'm trying to be charitable to the Santi. Like I want to be on your side, guys. You know, you're
Yeah,
you're you're saying we can't trust you because you're liars. It's like, okay, I'm a Kantian, I'm with you,
yeah, yeah.
but I'm half joking. Um, and I do think that's an interesting element of the story to think about, but they don't play with it as much as they could. And I want to talk to you about this question also. So I put in our notes, one of the things that was striking to me throughout is they pretty much never talk about global warming or anything along those lines. It's mentioned weirdly. It's
Yeah,
mentioned in a news story that you kind of hear in the background, though. So it's not as though it's a fictional world where it doesn't exist, apparently.
right.
But you have people saying, oh, well, these aliens aren't going to arrive for 400 years. You have them playing with the possibility of kind of taking the position of, who cares? I'll be dead by then. I'm just going to live my life and enjoy my life.
Right.
You have other people saying, "Oh, don't we have more pressing problems in less than 400 years?"
Right.
And I just kept thinking, like, maybe like climate change, maybe,
Yeah, so I'm wondering if
like,
yeah, if your thought on this is what do we care about 400 years from now because climate change is going to kill us in 200 years?
yeah, right? Like, is it that maybe like these people seem pretty confident that humanity's going to be around in 400 years and
I mean, how
without
disappointing.
anything being done to stop us, we're going to surpass the Santi technologically and all of that. It just felt weird to me as a
How disappointing for the Santi when they arrive and Earth is gone because we destroyed it, man. Just a waste of a trip.
yeah. So I mean, I guess one question I have for you, Ryan, having read the book, is there any more mention? Is there any more stuff about those types of environmental concerns in the book as
In
opposed to the
the
TV show, or is it just
in the
also
book and
kind
a
of a
half, so
loophole?
I've read a book and a half of the second. I do not recall anything about global warming
Interesting.
from that. But the whole story is sort of this. Um, it's an allegory that is the dangers of doing certain things and the dangers of not doing certain things,
Well,
right?
right, and that's the other reason I'm thinking about this is because there's a certain temptation to almost take the alien invasion story as an allegory for something like global warming.
Yeah,
It's a threat, but it's not going to be a threat until generations not yet born are around, right? Long after we're
yeah,
dead, this sort of thing. Should we be motivated to do things now to prevent catastrophe hundreds of years from now? It plays on that level, but then it's like weirdly,
yeah. It's
the
absent.
direct
Yeah.
thing's weirdly missing to me. I don't know.
I will be so I will report back. I do know the third book progressing the timeline towards much closer to the time that 400 years is, it's upon us. And so I'm curious what, if anything, it touches on there. So I've heard read that one. I'll have to give you more of an update on that.
All right. I mean, I don't know if it's not in the beginning, there's almost nothing for it because look, I'm not, how to say this. I'm not saying that I feel like the show needs to be giving it a real central place
Yeah.
necessarily, but it I found myself wondering throughout this first season whether it was a real thing in this world. Is it something that these characters know about? Right?
Yeah.
Because like if it's this world and a real thing within it, right? Like, and you're talking about physicists and stuff, and just that it doesn't get mentioned, right?
Yeah. Listen, they got other environmental scientists working on that problem while others are working on the nuclear propulsion parachute, right?
I
They have
just
different areas of expertise, right?
I just feel like you should at least have some doomer character who's like, who cares? 400 years from now, is it fucking, humanity's already going to be extinct because of global warming
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. It just
That
seemed like a
that
weird
would have
look
made
through
a
it to
little
me.
bit more, yeah, a little more 2024 in that moment. It does sort of circle back to um and you think about in the context of what we're experiencing today, what is hopeless versus what's inevitable versus what we need to focus on and what we don't, that it does all go back to this one character in 1960s, early 70s China who her personal experiences are such that we are lost. Humanity cannot save itself. Has all these horrific things happen to her. So she chooses, yes, I will respond to the aliens, sort of give them the roadmap, as it were, to get here. Right. And that's not, that was in more of a political, cultural environment, less of a, more scientific or technical discussions that we might be having today. But there certainly are some political conversations that we can have today to look at how, our country and our world might be lost. But it just sort of interesting to think about that decision of that one person who decided humanity is lost could
Mhm.
lead to humanity being lost, and just sort of the parallels that you can draw there of, yeah, that was back in a one specific instance of one specific country and one specific moment in time, but it does reflect sort of more of a culture that we're in today.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I mean, all sorts of things,
Yeah.
get lumped in there. And I did think that that was an interesting context for her in the Cultural Revolution, Maoist China, all of that. You think about the world at the time, Cold War, nuclear proliferation. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, cut to now also. It's, I don't know, you look at the world in political terms, geopolitical terms, it can be hard to feel exactly hopeful. Um, but then ultimately she kind of does repent on that front. Um, what do you think about that movement, right? Because a part of me almost felt like, okay, I get what led her to make this move in the first place, this kind of despair over humanity. I get that. Um, I almost didn't buy her repenting about it later as much, and I almost felt like it would have been more compelling if she'd stuck to her guns about it all the way up to her death or something.
Yeah, I think I have this right. That is a tremendous deviation from the books that she
Is
sort
it
of
okay?
committed. I think I have that right. But yeah, that just didn't land well with me. Let me sort of end of life, as it's use your word, repent of this, go and make my amends with whatever I need to or whoever I need to, and then just go back to the place where this began and let Tatiana just sort of peacefully take my life after I've done that. Just didn't wasn't
Yeah, I mean, it plays like she's finding out about the Little Red Riding Hood situation, and that they don't trust them anymore, and that like her group's not going to be safe, and then that's a turning point for her. But it's hard for me to respect it. It's like, oh, now you're going to be selfish. Now you're
yeah.
going to be like tribalistic or
Yeah,
whatever.
your daughter killed herself
Yeah,
because of
exactly.
this, and that didn't do it, right?
Yeah, I think it would have been more compelling to me if she had remained, however irrationally, in the space of I trust in the Santi to do
Yeah,
what's best,
yeah,
even despite this, even though they've apparently um, you know, whatever, betrayed my group or at this point, I still just trust like we were gonna do any better anyway. I still just
yeah,
trust them to do whatever's best
yeah.
to the
You've
planet.
spent
Yeah.
60 years thinking that humanity is lost, and you're going to trust in this other thing to redeem us or save us or whatever. Why at the 11th minute, 11th hour did you
And
change it?
there's and there's also this weird implication in that scene that she knew that if they found out that we lie, that that would be a problem. And that doesn't quite land for me either. Like what you were
Yeah,
somehow hiding,
yeah, yeah,
or thinking you were hiding. The fact that humanity engages in deception. So I don't know that whole scene didn't land very well for me. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess
No,
she's dead
that's
and
one
gone
I
now.
wish was not in there. Frankly, we could have done without it. We could have done without that.
Yeah. Another thing. This is related to something you put in our notes about the Judgment Day scene. This is, I mean, there's something very powerful about that scene, but also I found myself wondering. This is back to the science gripe a little bit. Like, why did they have to do the nanotechnology thing? Like, if you look at what happens, it's kind of like seems pretty similar to blowing up with a bomb to me.
Yeah, it's funny how much there are a lot of things different from the book. This is, I mean, almost identical. In the book, it starts going through even more justifications of why can't we do it this way? Why can't we send in a team? Why can't we bomb the place? Why can't we, gas it, knock everybody out? Why can't they have he just has all these justifications for why they can't do that. It almost in the book reads like I know that this cool technology exists and I want to come up with a reason to use it. Um, and so I'm sure, being off of YC, we were like, great, let's find a way to film this cool thing. There have been hundreds of pieces that have come out of this basically saying this cannot happen. What we have exists today.
It would be, yeah, but it still would have landed for me better, even if it was even more implausible, if it hadn't been explosions and fire and all of that
Yeah,
as a part of the scene. If they
exactly.
somehow just had the thing cleanly cut it into pieces with no fire or explosion and kill all the people and then just be laid out neatly so they could come. There's all this fire and explosion and all of that kind of stuff. And for all you know, you're looking for a notebook,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Exactly.
the way that they presented it just was like, all right, I guess we just have to accept that. But it just,
I,
at the end of the day, it didn't really seem motivated that they
and
had to absolutely use this.
I always had a problem accepting the fact that you can't, I guess it's a small chance and you're looking for a very small thing that they're trying to procure there, but you can't guarantee that wire's not going to cut through that thing as you enact that plan either.
I mean, I guess that's true too.
Yeah.
I guess
So
that's true. But, they could have, I don't know. Again, maybe getting a step even more implausible said, well, with this nanotechnology, we're just going to like turn the whole ship into little neat little cubes or
exactly.
something like that, or slices because they have it sliced, but then the fact that it explodes or there's fire and then they just magically walk right up and go, "Here's the hard drive,"
There it
and
is.
it's
Yep,
like,
we found it. Yeah. No,
okay,
it was interesting. I was reading something that the three showrunners said about this and other scenes, and one of them said, "Yeah, this was my favorite scene. Obviously, it was so much fun to shoot, so much fun to create, to envision all of this." Another one said, "Yeah, that was great, but really my favorite scene was Jonathan Pryce talking to a microphone, telling the Little Red Riding Hood story, and just sort of like this sense of the magnitude of scale between different things in this show." There's a lot of
yeah,
people that I've read and talked to that episode 5 with this scene. Yeah, that was sort of the highlight of the series, and others have said, "Oh no, it was this sort of the real intricate nature of the communication and then the relationships that were developed amongst the people in the present day." So it's just, just sort of how you interpreted the different things there.
yeah, that's fair. And I will say, I know I've levied some complaints against the show, but there is a way in which it captured my imagination, and I almost realized this more since I finished watching it a couple of nights ago, that it's still kind of in my brain. It's
Yeah.
still percolating around in my imagination. So it's got that going for it, I'll
Yeah.
say. It's got this kind of intriguing world that it managed to invest me in.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of science fiction focuses on the what we did to get here. Now this one has to focus on, is going to have to focus a lot on what are we going to do to get to a certain point or to stop a certain thing or to prevent a thing. And whether you're using that as specifically or exclusively to talk about aliens coming or using that to talk about what can we as civilization do if we have to face a big problem like climate change. There's just the forward nature looking of this show, which again, this is just the first of 3 seasons. I think it's going to be interesting as we get into, I can only presume that the next 2 seasons will follow a path of we get closer and closer and closer to 400 years from now. And how are we handling this?
yeah, I do wonder about that. And book readers, I'm sure, know a bit more. Let's talk about Will and Saul a little bit. I guess they make Will a brain in the vat. They're trying to send him on this probe, which fails to get the propulsion, but I guess still exists out there going slower. Is that
Yeah,
the right read?
well, he's out there, but he's off course. He's not on a trajectory to intercept this Santi
Oh, he's
ship.
also up. He's also
Yeah,
on the wrong trajectory.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So their plan of them finding his crypto frozen brain and reviving him and recreating him so that he can somehow signal back to Earth. That plan is gone. I mean, that was even more implausible than the thousand nuclear bombs, anyways. But neither here nor there.
Yeah. So okay. Outside chance of something happening with that, but probably that's just a failure and
Probably not. Nothing.
probably
Yeah,
races over.
yeah,
And then towards I think it's in the last episode of the season, Saul is to his surprise, named as a wall facer, and you have this whole
Mm.
idea of the wall facer program as a way to fight against the aliens who have surveillance everywhere. Thoughts about all of that?
Yeah, so the wall facer program is introduced in the beginning of the second book. So basically, I've stopped right and reading it right after they have introduced this idea. So I
Okay.
don't know what happens with that idea. And if you just watch this, it's almost seems as implausible as some of these other things. There's going to be three people in the world that are going to mentally prepare for something to happen and pass these ideas along, I guess. Um, like I said, I don't understand the timeline of this because obviously these three people are not going to exist 400 years from now. So I guess they're going to pass on their plans to other people. Um, but they have to, I just don't understand
Okay, that's
the
interesting.
realism of we're going to have plans that are not in any sort of database or computer written down or anything that we can, at a moment's notice, enact whatever it is, and the Santi won't have time to react to that. That's basically what the wall facers are.
I thought it seemed a little bit more complex than that, from what I gathered. I did go and like read something, so maybe it's very kind of quick and thrown in the show. And I think
Mhm.
you mentioning that it's introduced at the beginning of the second book makes sense to me because I think it's introduced in the last episode of the first season to set up the
Yes,
second season,
correct.
right? Like I do think this is going to be an important element of where the story is going.
Yeah.
But as I understood, the idea was that these wall facers, um, yeah, so they're supposed to think about plans just in themselves and not put them out in the world. But the other aspect of this, which I do think they say in the last episode of season one here, um, is that everyone's supposed to follow their orders without questioning.
Exactly.
So they're not supposed to tell anyone what the plan is
Yeah.
at all, but then they can give orders that everyone's supposed to follow, at least in the government or whatever, whoever's involved in this, without question. And maybe they're potentially encouraged to even do some stuff kind of on a lark to confuse the Santee or whatever. And I kind of get the idea if you have this alien threat who's got global surveillance of everything that we're doing,
Hmm.
the thought is, well, they're not mind readers, right?
Right.
So maybe there's some space for some select group of people to work on plans that they're kept private. Then we're going to empower these people in this way. And I mean, the negative of that is obvious. So it'll be kind of interesting to see where it goes. I agree with what you said, though, in terms of like the plausibility of this working as a
Yeah.
way to is
Yeah.
pretty low. I don't know
And
that it's going to work.
yeah, and I don't know, like if say by the middle of the second book and the middle of the second season that this has gone the way of the nuclear bombs where they've abandoned it or they've decided it's not possible. I just don't know. And I think
Yeah,
that's
or
just
you get a
we should
counter,
find out. Yeah,
you get an opposition to it because you have these people out there in the world just like giving orders and making decisions without any rationale, and that's
exactly.
part of the whole idea. I can definitely see that happening. You did make me wonder, noting the time scale of it, whether it would be
Hmm.
like a Dalai Lama kind of thing,
Yeah.
in terms of who becomes the next wall facer. Do you know what I'm talking about? What's the other one? There's the Dalai Lama, and then there's the other Lama. Ugh.
Oh
Anyhow,
gosh.
in religious terms, right? Of course, this
Mhm.
is the reincarnated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I almost need that term, but anyway, my understanding of how they have it set up is the one identifies the other. So there's two actually, right?
Yeah.
And there is someone in the world tasked with saying this is the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes. I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Geopolitically, it's actually really complex because China has that person who
Right.
is supposed to identify the next Dalai Lama. Um, and so potentially the currently living Dalai Lama has said that he might be the last Dalai Lama because there's a question of whether you can trust the identification of the next Dalai Lama or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyhow, got into the weeds about this and forgotten one of the terms. But anyway, it would have to be almost something like this, right? Where
Yeah.
the wall facer appoints their successor or something, and it's going to last for
Yeah.
400 years.
I just think as you start playing telephone across 400 years, that if you got the best possible plan, it's going to leak out. And also was a bit confusing at the same time, just suspend some disbelief for this, but Liam Cunningham, who plays Thomas Wade, has devised a plan where he's going to put himself in cryosleep and wake up
Right.
every 10 years, right? But they've not made any mention that that's what they're going to do to the wall facer folks to make sure that they're, there's some continuity in what they're planning and what they want to do. But Wade wants to do this to make sure, he oversees the plans and how they're supposed to happen over the next several hundred years.
Yeah, so maybe it actually wouldn't be a Dalai Lama type of thing. That wouldn't work because they couldn't have a way to pass their planning to the next one,
Yeah.
right? So maybe it's you get a lifetime as a wall facer, and then once you're dead, they'll just appoint another wall facer. It'd have to almost be something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
we'll see where that goes. I'm sure that's going to be a big part of season two.
yeah, I'm sure, and that was one of the things. Again, I put this in our notes that baffled me a little bit is that Saul almost seems like he is literally there for nothing. The first 7 episodes of the season, he just does literally nothing. And
Yeah.
then, so we have, just like he is confused, we are as confused as he is. Why is he chosen for this? We don't really have a concept of that yet. They said it was not time to reveal it to him. Um, Dr. Wenji sits down with him and sort of tells him this story, this joke, to help him try to understand why he has been chosen. But we really don't know that reason. And I think, as you said, that'll be a big part of what's unveiled next season.
Yeah, for sure. So I did enjoy watching this, Ryan. I
Yeah.
mean, and it had been on my list,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I had the intention even of watching it right when it came out, and I didn't. So made the time here. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up here?
No, that's what I had on my list. Yeah, we don't have any sense of when the next 2 seasons will come out, but we do have confirmation they will get 2 more and that they will align in, some way with those next 2 novels. So um, just I guess maybe the last question. Do you think this would have been a show that would have benefited from the week to week as opposed to the binge?
Probably. I mean, insofar as I tend to think that about everything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I binged it, so it's hard for me to
yeah,
get too down on the binge watching experience. I definitely think it worked as a binge watch, and one of the big things that I always have in mind in criticizing the all at once model is that things have a way of being in the cultural conversation for a short period of time and then kind of fading. Whereas if you're doing it
yeah,
week to week, you can really kind of stretch that out, all the stuff around the show.
yeah.
So that's where with this one, I think it would have benefited in ways that are hard to predict, having people just talking about it,
Hmm.
doing podcasts in between episodes, and all of that. And
Yeah,
there's no way of knowing exactly what that would look like, but I can certainly see a show like this inspiring that kind of activity in a way
absolutely.
where instead you get, I mean, like probably most things that are out there are kind of like what we just did, talking about the whole season at once.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I've consumed a lot of those things, and you just it's a story that now that it's all there, it's hard to break up. Like it was hard to break up and write about it because so many pieces led and connected to others. But yeah, everything out there is either preseason or postseason, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I'm sure someone out there has done episode recaps somewhere. I'm
Yeah,
sure, it's like
that's
we see
true.
you if you're listening. You let us know about it if you want. If you went episode by episode, but it's very hard to do when you know that the world is pushing forward.
Exactly.
So
Well,
that's also going to be
speaking of a show that should be week to week, but has dropped as a binge, we
yeah.
should talk a little bit about. We're going to move on to next week, The Bear.
Right. So we're gearing up for season 3 of The Bear, which will
Yep.
release all at once on June 27th. Definitely, we're going to talk about that once it's out. And we have to think a little bit more about exactly how we're going to approach that. We have to talk about that a little bit. We can do that off the air. Um, but then next week, in preparation for that, we're going to talk about The Bear. What do you have in mind exactly? We look back at season 2. We speculate about season 3. What all do you want to do next week, right?
Yeah, I think it'd just be interesting just to, level set where we are, where we left everyone, what we might expect coming for three. I think there are some pretty interesting threads that were left dangling, particularly with Carm, with Marcus, with I think just how all we saw in the restaurant was a sneak preview, a friends and family night. Certainly what's going to be a big part of the season is just the dynamic and the challenge of keeping a successful restaurant going. So, but in addition to that, just some of the things I think we need to catch up on of where we left these characters, because that lead a lot into sort of the dynamics of what they do in the next season.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to season three. Um, and yeah, again, well, yeah, we do need to talk about how we're going to approach season three on the podcast, but we'll
Mhm.
do that. We don't need to do that on the podcast. So,
Right.
okay, we won't get there right now. So, okay, I think that does it for this week. Thanks as always for listening. If you've enjoyed the pod, please do consider leaving a good rating, review wherever you're listening. If you're on YouTube, give a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Um, check out tvobsessive.com. You can follow the site on social media on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and so on and so forth. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right. Looking forward to it. Talk to you then.